Hi, I'm Gil Gockley. Welcome to my love-centered meeting house. This is video 3 of the 8 videos that I'll be sharing with you. This one is a little interesting. We already covered step 1, identify your feelings to yourself. Step 2, get in touch with your positive inner self, your positive inner voice. And then that allows you to more effectively deal with feelings, flow with it, face it. And then we talked about meditation and we talked about contemplation. Today, we're really dealing with the spiritual, step 4. And we're talking about 2 elements that I've received through a spiritual epiphany. I know there's some question you may have about that, and I appreciate that. It could be just my own experience, my own knowledge. But I believe I was guided to come up with 5 spiritual gifts. I saw them. They're down here. We'll talk about the 5 spiritual gifts. God is love. Love God. Love all your neighbors. Live the golden rule, treating others the way you want to be treated. And believe. Believe in a higher power, however you define that higher power. I'm also going to talk about 26 authentic messages of Jesus that I believe I was guided to get. I want to talk about the 5 spiritual gifts. These are really powerful messages that I think can lead you to a more enriching and powerful spiritual life. One of the questions people have asked me over the years is, what are God's expectations for me? And I'm going to share some things with you, realizing that everything I say is open for discussion. I want to start a dialogue about what are God's expectations that can be turned into practical daily activities. I want you to turn to page 90, and I'm going to spend a little time on this issue of God's expectations. And again, don't close down. I want you to stay open-minded, and just reflect, what do you think? What are you feeling? I want to read the meditation on page 90, day 31, God's expectations for you. Intrapersonal reflections or thoughts I am saying to my inner self. I imagine that most individuals have, to some degree, beliefs about God. I'm in the process of articulating my beliefs about God. One of my most important questions is, what are God's expectations for me? This Jesus-centered, God-loving devotional section presents 5 spiritual gifts that can serve as a foundation as I explore my beliefs about God. I'm internally free to discover my own religious spiritual beliefs. 5 spiritual gifts give clarity to and enhance my spiritual journey. These life principles enrich my spiritual journey to the heart. This inspirational book gives me hope and validates the necessity for me to follow Jesus' teaching. I am a loving, caring, kind-hearted, and compassionate disciple of Jesus. The 5 spiritual gifts. God is love. Love God with all your heart. Love all your neighbors. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And believe in a higher power, however you define that higher power. I'm going to continue reading. After my death and resurgence, I plan to be invited to God's festival. There will be many to come to God's invitation unprepared. These are my thoughts from my life experience and my reflection on what Jesus is teaching us. Who will not be unprepared? Those individuals living a life filled with arrogance, piety, and self-centeredness. Those individuals living a life filled with greed and selfishness. Those acting upon a self-serving, controlling, negative and fear-based philosophy of life. Those living with an intimidating, judgmental, and mean-spirited attitude, and or those living a life filled with hatred, racism, and violence. At the top of the page, these are my thoughts based on the messages of Jesus. There will be a few who come to God's invitation prepared. Those individuals who believe that God is love and believe God loves them. Those who loved God with all their hearts during their time on earth. Those who loved all their neighbors as much as they loved themselves. Those who gave generously and unselfishly. Those who gave their fair share to others in need of the basics in life: food, clothing, water, shelter, medical care, and neighborliness. Let's look at just two of those issues with 5 spiritual gifts. On page 93, under Points to Ponder, after asking God to reveal authentic messages of Jesus, I experienced an epiphany, a sudden, startling spiritual understanding. I felt called to write down the first 26 spiritual messages of Jesus I've read in the Bible. I was amazed at what I wrote down. Being spiritually guided is not that unusual. Spiritual guidance is available to all of us who believe in the love of God and connect with God's Spirit. Again, I'm going to ask you, are you meditating 20 minutes a day? I'm going to ask you, are you completing assignments every day so that you stay engaged in this process on a daily basis? This is one of my favorite quotes ever. I believe you have the Spirit of God within you. And here's the quote. Do you know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? For God's temple is holy, and that temple is you. Let me repeat that. Do you know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? For God's temple is holy, and that temple is you. Early Christians focused on Jesus' insights and wisdom and would have concentrated on his spiritual messages and parables. Near the bottom of the page, think of self-knowledge, spiritual knowledge, living knowledge, or training manual as a primer for better understanding Jesus' spiritual messages and parables, and the good news that God is love and that he loves you. At age 24, in 1968, I found my life mission to discover the secrets for becoming a complete person, an emotionally healthy and spiritually whole person. Today, I am seeing that life mission realized. I am touching the love, the light, the Spirit of God within me. I am being spiritually guided. I'd like to just go to page 97, and I'd like to just read the meditation regarding the second spiritual gift, love God. It is really simple. God is love, and I am called to love God with all my heart. I am in love with a spiritual, loving, accepting God. I am filled with LOVE and become more committed to put into perspective all references to a fear-based, negative, judgmental God. I am dedicating my life to a love-based, positive, accepting God. I am preparing to be invited and accepted into God's kingdom by filling my heart and soul and daily behaviors with love. Loving God makes a difference in my life. Loving God with all my heart affects all of my life decisions, gives me inner peace and inner goodness, and generates a healing spirit within. I never feel alone as I embrace a loving God. God's loving spirit is always with me. God's spirit is always available to me. All people are welcome to my spiritual retreat. Strong believers, believers with many questions, individuals who struggle with religious dogma, and those who go through life without ever thinking about religious and spiritual matters. You are all welcome to this spiritual retreat. On this program here, on this step 4, it's the only time really that I'm presenting Jesus to you. But between Jesus' 26 spiritual messages and the 30 theses, it consumes 30% of the book. So it's pretty significant. I want to tell you that I am your education teacher. I'm your guide through this 11-step inner process. Jesus is your spiritual teacher. Whether you are Jewish or Muslim or Christian, a non-churchgoer or a non-believer, Jesus is a spiritual teacher for all of you. He will guide you to experience the promise of love. He will guide you to act upon the most significant life premise ever shared by Jesus. Here it is. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Think of that. I mean, we say it. Oh yeah, I believe in the golden rule. I want you to think about it. What would it be like to be in a situation where you're upset with someone and you ask yourself, how would I want to be treated if I was that person? If I was on an interview, how would I want to be treated by those interviewers? It's a powerful, and you talk about the promise of a kingdom, however you define it. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Jesus will guide you to let your inner light shine so the world can be just a little bit brighter because of your love and inner goodness. And again, keep the possibility open. I'll say that over and over. But Jesus will guide you. And one of his reasons for being on earth was to prepare all of us for the wonder and glory of God's kingdom. I'm going to read a few messages of Jesus' 26 spiritual messages. I want you to turn to page 109. It's the second spiritual message, second one of the 26. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. As you did these good deeds to one of the least of these brethren, you did to me. Turn the page to the third spiritual message. I've got to do this on the golden rule. These are Jesus' words. So whatever you wish that men and women would do to you, so do to them, for this is the law and the prophets. I want to just share in Luke, he talks about the Good Samaritan. You might know the story Jesus told about the Good Samaritan who, unlike the priest and Levite, who passed a man who was beaten by robbers, had compassion, bound up his wounds, and paid an innkeeper to take care of him. Jesus asked the man, "Which of these three do you think proved neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" The man said, "The one who showed mercy on him." Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." Turn the page to 115 and mark another one of my favorites. It's the fifth message of Jesus. You are the light of the world. There's a book called The Message. If you don't know about it, I have reference in the front of the book. I want to read the message relative to you are the light of the world. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors of the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you a light bearer, you don't light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, you put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I love that one. I want to give you another one. The 10th spiritual message. This one, you know I was spiritually guided. I would have never even thought about listing this one. It has come to be one of my favorites. When you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and churches and at the street corners, that they may be seen by men and women. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Here's my interpretation. When you meditate and contemplate, you're praying in secret. Think about it. Meditation is sitting quietly in order to relax your mind and body, and eventually sensing the Spirit of God within you. Meditation is a time when God speaks to you. Contemplation is talking to yourself, to your emotionally healthy inner self that is filled with love and inner goodness in the presence of God. You also contemplate when you talk directly with God. Pray in secret. I love that. I'm going to jump to the 22nd spiritual message. It's on piety. Beware of practicing your piety before men and women in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. I want to read that same passage from the perspective of the message. Be especially careful when you are trying to be good, so that you don't make a performance out of it. It might be good theater, but the God who made you won't be applauding. When you do something for someone else, don't call attention to yourself. You're seeing them in action, I'm sure, the play actors I call them, treating prayer meetings and street corner alike as a stage, acting compassionately as long as someone is watching, playing the crowds. They get applause, true, but that's all they get. When you help someone out, don't think about how it looks. Just do it, quietly and unobtrusively. That is the way your God, who conceived you in love, working behind the scenes, helps you out. The last one, I want to do spiritual lesson number 23. a very important one for me. It's called false prophets. Again, I want to read from the Message. Be wary of false preachers who smile a lot, dripping with practiced sincerity. Chances are they are out to rip you off in some way or another. Don't be impressed with charisma. Look for character. Who preachers are is the main thing, not what they say. A genuine leader will never exploit your emotions or your pocketbook. I want to read my interpretation. This is an important parable for you to consider. I am drawn to the idea that a genuine religious leader will never exploit your emotions or your pocketbook. We just discussed the good fruits. Here are a few of my favorites. Again, believing God is love and that God loves you. Loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Loving all your neighbors as you love yourself. Not just the ones that look like you. Not just the ones that sound like you. Not just the ones that believe as you do. We are being called to love all of our neighbors. Being pure in heart. Humble and non-judgmental. Open and loving, accepting and kind-hearted. Merciful and a peacemaker. And loving, giving, and forgiving are God-loving qualities, putting righteousness, the love-centered behaviors God expects from us, into action for all to see. I want to read that again. Being pure in heart, humble and non-judgmental, open and loving, accepting and kind-hearted, merciful and a peacemaker, and loving, giving, and forgiving. These are the qualities you and I want to live. Next week, I'm going to be dealing with the most controversial piece of all 8 videos, the 30 Theses. When I was called to get out of bed and write the 30 Theses and had no idea what that meant, I just did it. So I'm looking forward to next week. Be in love, walk in the light.